At the Grand Aurora Charity Gala, beneath crystal chandeliers and flashing cameras, something unthinkable happened. Jude Maloro, the powerful CEO everyone feared, leaned toward his elegant wife, Amara, and spat directly into her face. The entire hall froze, gasps echoed. Zuri, the young model clinging to Jude's arm, smirked as if victory was hers. Yet Amara did not flinch. She simply wiped her cheek, her calm eyes burning with a fire no one understood, because only she knew what would happen next. Only she knew the power she held, and only she knew that within minutes, Jude's empire would crumble, starting with the cancellation of his $800 million construction deal. Before we dive deeper into this explosive story, tell me your location and local time. I love seeing our global family gathered here. And if you enjoy dramatic folktale-style stories, feel free to subscribe and join our growing community. 3 years earlier, no one could have imagined that the couple who now stood on opposite sides of a glittering ballroom would one day become enemies under the eyes of the entire elite circle. Back then, Jude Maloro was merely an ambitious builder, a man with a charming smile and dreams far bigger than his bank account. He spoke eloquently about transforming Africa's urban landscape, creating affordable housing, building sustainable cities, and reshaping skylines. He dazzled investors with his passion, but passion alone could not secure multi-million-dollar contracts. What he lacked, however, Amara possessed in abundance. Amara Nwoko was already a rising force in the world of infrastructure investment. When she met Jude, her brilliance came quietly, like a calm river hiding tremendous depth. She didn't flaunt wealth or power the way others in her circle did. Instead, she let her work speak. The daughter of a respected civil engineer and a philanthropist mother, she inherited her parents' blend of integrity and empathy. When she met Jude at an economic forum in Lagos, he presented himself as a man with vision, integrity, and desperation to improve the world. Amara was touched by what she believed was sincerity. To her, Jude represented hunger, something she respected deeply. Their romance began like flames, catching dry wood quickly and intensely. In just 6 months, Jude proposed. He told her, "With you, I don't just see love. I see a future where two powerful minds can build something meaningful." It was a beautiful line, one Amara held close to her heart. She believed she had finally found someone who valued both her intelligence and her spirit. She married him quietly, without lavish displays, preferring intimacy to spectacle. Their wedding photo showed two people smiling with a sense of partnership and hope. But photographs don't reveal the shadows that exist beyond the frame. At first, Jude behaved like the doting husband everyone dreamed of. He cooked for her on weekends. He left little notes in her office telling her she was brilliant. He attended every event she hosted, smiling proudly at her side. But as her influence grew, so did his ego. The shift was small in the beginning, the little comments disguised as jokes. "You know, people only respect me because of you," he said once, laughing it off. Another time, "Without your connections, I doubt my company would have gotten this far." Amara always brushed them aside, thinking they came from insecurity rather than ill will. But insecurity, when fed by ambition, can become poison. The turning point came a year into their marriage. Amara was invited to join the advisory board of the African Infrastructure Development Fund, a massive institution responsible for allocating billions for regional projects. It was one of the most prestigious roles in the continent, and she accepted it with humility. To her, it meant greater responsibility, greater service. But to Jude, it meant something else entirely: opportunity. He celebrated her appointment with a lavish dinner, but beneath his congratulations, his eyes burned with calculation. He saw doors opening, doors he believed he deserved to walk through. Soon, Jude's tone shifted again. He no longer praised her achievements, he expected them. He no longer asked about her work, he demanded influence from it. And whenever Amara hesitated, he began diminishing her. "You're too emotional. You don't understand the real world of business. Stop acting like you're better than me. If you cared about family, you'd help us grow, not slow us down. These words didn't come in moments of anger. They came calmly, deliberately, like a craftsman chiseling a sculpture. Only, he wasn't sculpting her, he was trying to break her. Their fights grew sharper, though Amara rarely raised her voice. She believed respect must remain even in conflict. But Jude did not play by the same rules. He insulted her ideas, dismissed her concerns, belittled her opinions in private and sometimes even in front of friends. Yet the world still saw a perfect couple because Amara hid the cracks, convinced she could fix them. She always believed people deserved patience. She always believed love could soften the hardest edges. She always believed Jude's cruelty came from fear, not malice. But love alone cannot save someone determined to destroy what they have. Slowly, Amara began seeing patterns she had ignored. Jude made major business decisions without consulting her, but blamed her when the outcomes were poor. He claimed he was under unbearable pressure and needed her support. But when she offered thoughtful guidance, he accused her of trying to dominate him. He sought sympathy from others by telling them he felt emasculated by a powerful wife. The man she had married for his vision now resented her for her success. But the deepest wound came the day he shouted at her during a board dinner. Amara had gently corrected a figure he misquoted while pitching to an investor. Instead of thanking her, Jude turned on her in front of everyone. "Don't embarrass me like that ever again," he hissed. It was the first time his mask cracked in public. Guests pretended not to notice. But Amara felt the shift. A line had been crossed. That night, she sat alone on their balcony, staring at the city lights. She replayed their entire relationship, searching for the moment when love turned into weapon. She wondered if she had ignored too many signs. She wondered if Jude had ever loved her, or if she had been nothing more than a ladder for him to climb. Yet even then, she stayed. Not out of weakness, but out of hope, the stubborn hope that people could change if given grace. But grace is not infinite. As Jude's company grew, so did his arrogance. He surrounded himself with flatterers, people who told him he was a genius. He stopped coming home early. He stopped asking for her thoughts. He began controlling her schedule, urging her to attend events with him simply to boost his image. When she questioned him, he brushed her aside as if she were an inconvenience. The man she once believed in had become a stranger she barely recognized. Still, she endured. Still, she prayed. Still, she believed that marriage, even fractured, deserved effort, but what she did not know was that Jude had already begun building a life without her. And soon, that new life would appear before her eyes, bringing with it betrayal deep enough to reshape everything she thought she knew about love, loyalty, and the man she once vowed to cherish. Amara's growing unease became reality the day she attended a charity luncheon in Nairobi, an event Jude had claimed he was too busy to join. She had no reason to doubt him. After all, his schedule was always packed. But midway through the luncheon, as she stepped out to take a call, she noticed a familiar voice drifting from the hotel garden. Jude's voice, smooth, proud, slightly theatrical. The version of him he used when he wanted to impress someone. She followed the sound, curiosity outweighing caution, and what she saw froze her steps. Jude was seated beneath a shaded pergola, wearing the same suit he had told her he would use for a meeting that afternoon. And sitting beside him, laughing softly, was a young woman Amara had never seen before. Her skin glowed with youth, her dress hugged her like a second skin, and her eyes, sharp and calculating, were fixed on Jude as though he were the center of the universe. Zuri. Though Amara didn't yet know her name, she recognized instantly what she was seeing, the way Jude leaned in, the way Zuri touched his hand, the way his smile softened soft in a way it no longer was with Amara. It wasn't a business meeting, it wasn't mentorship, it wasn't friendship, it was intimacy. A slow, confident intimacy that had grown over time. Amara didn't storm forward. She didn't scream. She didn't confront them. Instead, she simply turned away. Her heart felt like glass pressed under a steel boot. But outwardly, she was composed. Years in the world of diplomacy and leadership had taught her how to bury emotion under layers of dignity. That evening, Jude came home late, smelling faintly of cologne and champagne. When Amara asked about his meeting, he fed her lies with the ease of a man who had rehearsed them. She listened quietly, her gaze steady. Not once did she accuse, not once did she mention what she saw. She wanted honesty, not confessions dragged out through confrontation, but honesty never came. Days later, rumors began swirling in the circles Amara frequented. Whispers about Jude and a stunning young model, a woman who appeared on red carpets too close, photographs too intimate, and social gatherings too private. Zuri had a reputation, an ambitious social climber who used beauty as currency. Men flaunted her like an accessory. Jude, it seemed, had become one of them. At first, Amara dismissed the gossip, but gossip became reality when she attended a business conference in Johannesburg. She walked into the ballroom and saw Jude arriving moments later with Zuri holding his arm. Cameras flashed, Zuri posed, Jude basked in the attention, and Amara stood frozen, humiliated, as her husband introduced Zuri as a close friend, helping with brand relations. Brand relations. That was the day respect died. Jude didn't even bother hiding his disdain anymore. He minimized Amara in conversations, interrupting her with dismissive comments. When Zuri was present, he treated Amara as if she were invisible. At one event, Zuri wore a dress strikingly similar to one Amara had worn weeks earlier, as though copying her was a game, and when people noticed, Jude laughed and said, "Well, Zuri wears it better." Those words cut deeper than betrayal. They reduced Amara from partner to comparison. Yet Amara still did not lash out. She observed, she thought, she calculated. Like a quiet storm waiting for the right wind, the breaking point came during a small board dinner at the residence of an investor. Amara had been invited for her expertise, Jude only as her guest. During the formal presentation, Jude made exaggerated claims about his company's capacity to deliver a new housing development. The numbers he cited were unrealistic, bordering on deceitful. Amara, concerned for the credibility of the room, gently corrected one figure, an inflated project timeline he had invented to impress the audience. She didn't contradict him harshly. She didn't embarrass him intentionally. She simply clarified, softly and professionally. But Jude reacted as though she had stabbed him. He slammed his palm on the table and snapped, "If you don't understand the numbers, don't speak. You're not the one running a real business." The room went silent. Investors exchanged glances. Wine glasses trembled. Zuri smirked beside him, enjoying the spectacle as though it were entertainment crafted for her pleasure. Amara lowered her gaze, not from shame but from disbelief. Never had Jude spoken to her like that in public. At home, yes. In private moments, frequently, but never before an audience. That night, when they returned home, Jude acted as though nothing had happened. He poured himself whiskey, loosened his tie, and dismissed his behavior as normal stress. He said she should learn not to overshadow him. He said she needed to know her place, her place. Something shifted deep within Amara at those words. A quiet but irreversible fracture. She had given patience. She had given grace. She had given him loyalty beyond what he deserved. But loyalty should be met with respect, not erasure. From that moment, she began paying attention to everything Jude assumed she did not see. He withdrew large sums of money from their joint accounts. He expanded his construction firm recklessly. He made lavish purchases for business image. He left home earlier, came home later, stopped sleeping beside her, stopped speaking to her unless he needed something, stopped acknowledging her as his equal, even as his wife. Zuri, emboldened by Jude's arrogance, started attending more events as though she were the rightful partner. She clung to Jude in photographs. She posted captions implying possession. Jude reposted them, publicly, shamelessly. The world noticed long before Amara commented. People pitied her, admired her composure, whispered behind her back that she had become too soft or too forgiving. But Amara did not correct them. Her silence wasn't weakness, It was strategy, and she was waiting, observing, until the right truth revealed itself. That truth arrived when Jude's company submitted its proposal for a massive $800 million construction contract under the African Infrastructure Development Fund, the very institution where Amara served as a senior executive. If Jude thought nepotism would secure victory, he underestimated the woman he had spent years belittling. When Amara reviewed the documents, she discovered something far worse than sloppy accounting. Jude had fabricated budget lines, inflated material costs, and concealed subcontractor conflicts. His numbers weren't just unethical, they were criminal. She flipped through page after page, realizing the man she once trusted had gambled his entire empire on lies, hoping her authority would shield him. He believed she would bend to him. He believed she would follow him blindly. He believed she had no backbone left to resist him. But betrayal creates a clarity love cannot. Amara stared at those documents with a coldness she had never felt. Jude had underestimated her humanity, her intelligence, and her strength. And now, he had given her the final proof she needed not to destroy him, but to allow him to destroy himself. She sent the documents for independent auditing. She followed protocol meticulously. She said nothing to Jude. She simply watched him drift deeper into his illusions, while she prepared for the moment he would face the consequences. But before consequences came confrontation. Before confrontation came humiliation. Before humiliation came the gala. And before the gala came one final betrayal so cruel, so careless, that it marked the point of no return. A betrayal that would ignite everything she had been holding inside. The final betrayal did not come with shouting or slammed doors. It came wrapped in glitter, camera flashes, and the false language of celebration. It began as an email in Amara's inbox, an official notice from the African Infrastructure Development Fund confirming her promotion from senior executive to acting director of the Regional Urban Expansion Program. It was a major step. She would now oversee the allocation of some of the largest infrastructure contracts on the continent, including a flagship $800 million construction project designed to reshape an entire coastal city. When she read the email, she felt a mix of gratitude and weight. Her father had once dreamed of large-scale, ethical urban development for African cities. Now she held the power to choose who would build it. She called Jude to share the news first, hoping that despite everything, he would at least be happy for her. He answered on speakerphone, his voice slightly distracted. There was music in the background, light laughter, a clink of glasses. "I've just been appointed acting director for the Regional Urban Expansion Program," she said softly, waiting for even a hint of pride. "I'll be overseeing the $800 million Harbor City expansion contract." There was a short pause. Then, Jude laughed short and sharp. "Wow," he said. "So you're finally in a position to do something really useful for us. Not, I'm proud of you. Not, you've worked so hard. Only expectation, only entitlement, Jude," she replied carefully. "This is a very sensitive role. Everything must be handled transparently. Every contractor." "Relax, Amara," he cut in. "You talk as if we're strangers to each other. You're my wife. My company is perfect for this. We've already started drafting the proposal." Her heart sank. "You've what?" "Don't sound so surprised," he said. "We've known for months the fund was planning a major project. You think I wouldn't prepare? You're in the perfect position now. This is our moment." "Our moment?" He said it like a promise, but it sounded like a threat. Later that evening, Amara walked into their shared home office and found documents scattered everywhere. Blueprints, cost estimates, marketing drafts. At the center of it all sat a glossy preliminary brochure with Jude's face on it, beneath the slogan, "Reimagining Africa's Future." He strode in confidently, kissed the side of her head without really looking at her, and pointed at the plans. "This is the Harbor City expansion," he said. "I'm calling it the Maloro Vision." "The fund hasn't even published the final tender documents," Amara murmured. "True," he replied easily, "but insiders talk, timelines leak. Besides, once your appointment is public, everyone will assume we're frontrunners anyway. Why waste time pretending otherwise? His arrogance was suffocating when the official tender was announced. Jude's company was among the first to submit a proposal. It arrived on her desk like any other, thick with appendices, technical specifications, and financial breakdowns. Protocol dictated that she should not directly handle proposals where she had a conflict of interest, so she followed the rules, assigning independent reviewers to lead the evaluation while she remained structurally distant from the process. But before stepping fully back, she skimmed through the documents not as a wife, but as a professional, and what she saw made her blood run cold. Inflated cost margins hidden behind complicated formulas, unrealistic timelines disguised with vague language, subcontractors with histories of faulty work, materials downgraded in reality but described as premium in the documents. It was the kind of manipulation that crumbled bridges and cracked walls years ahead of schedule, the kind of dishonesty that turned proud cities into dangerous ones. Amara sat alone at her desk, fingers pressed tightly together, staring at the pages as the realization settled. Jude didn't just want an opportunity. He wanted a shortcut. He wasn't just nudging lines. He was actively sabotaging the ethical standards she had sworn to uphold. That night, she confronted him gently. "I've seen your proposal," she said. "The numbers aren't clean, Jude. The cost is inflated. The material specs don't match what you actually use." He didn't flinch. He poured himself a drink and shrugged. "That's how the game is played, Amara. Nobody wins big contracts by being naive. You think others aren't doing the same. At least with me, the money stays in the family." She stared at him in disbelief. "This isn't a game. We're talking about housing for thousands of people. Schools, hospitals, roads, their safety." He rolled his eyes. "Spare me the sermon. You and your moral speeches," he sneered. "You sound like your father, noble, idealistic, and totally out of touch with how things really work." Something snapped quietly inside her at the mention of her father, the man who had built bridges with his bare hands, who had died on a rural construction site because safety equipment was compromised to cut costs. The kind of cost-cutting Jude now justified. "Do you remember how my father died?" she asked softly. Jude froze for a moment, then took a sip of his drink to avoid her gaze. "Don't twist this," he muttered. "I'm not compromising safety. I'm just adjusting numbers so that we can profit. Isn't that what every smart business does?" "Smart," she repeated quietly. "Is it smart to depend on your wife breaking her ethics for you?" He set his glass down with a sharp clink. "You owe me," he said suddenly, his voice low. "Do you think I haven't noticed how people talk? Amara, the brilliant investor. Amara, the visionary. I'm always in your shadow, always introduced as your husband. This is my chance to overshadow you for once, to prove I'm more than just the man beside the powerful woman. You know what it would mean if I get this contract. It will define my legacy." Legacy. He wanted legacy, even if it meant walking over everything she believed in. "And what about my legacy?" she asked. "What about the people who will live in those buildings? What about the reputation of the fund? What about the oath I took?" He laughed bitterly. "Your oath? To who? To strangers who won't remember your name. I'm your husband. This is family. Or does your honor matter more than your own home?" The room fell into a silence so thick it was hard to breathe. In that silence, Amara saw the truth. Jude didn't love her. He loved what she could give him. Access, legitimacy, power. She did not scream. She did not cry. Instead, she said one sentence that drew a clear line. "I will not compromise for you," she said. "Not on this. Not ever." His eyes hardened. For a moment, she thought he might apologize. Instead, he tilted his head and smiled with chilling calm. "Then don't," he replied. "Just stay out of the way. There are other people on the board. Not everything needs your signature to move." That was the betrayal, not the affair, not the public humiliation. That was the moment he declared war not just on her heart, but on her principles, on everything that made her who she was. From that day, Jude acted as if victory was guaranteed. He bragged to friends about being a shoo-in for the $800 million contract. He upgraded his car, expanded his office, and hired new staff even before any official announcement. Zuri flaunted designer bags and diamond bracelets. Gifts clearly bought with money he didn't yet have. At private events, Jude toasted to the future with careless confidence. Soon, he would say, Maloro construction will be on every billboard. But Amara had not stayed out of the way. She had quietly ordered a full third-party audit of every line in his proposal. She had formally disclosed her conflict of interest and stepped back from any discussion involving his company. She had ensured that every decision regarding the contract would be scrutinized by people who owed her nothing and feared no one. When the audit results came back, the findings were damning. Fraudulent claims, misrepresentation, financial manipulation. It wasn't just a weak proposal, it was a trap waiting to collapse. Amara read every page alone in her office, her chest tight but her resolve unwavering. If she did nothing, she would be complicit. If she hid this, she would betray not only her position, but the memory of her father and everything she had built. So she chose. She chose truth over convenience, duty over sentiment, self-respect over a rotten marriage. And even as Jude paraded around with Zuri, boasting that the upcoming Aurora charity gala would be the night his triumph was quietly confirmed, Amara already knew something he did not. His victory was an illusion, his empire was rotting from within, and on the very night he planned to burn her dignity in public, she would stand still, calm, and watch his entire future evaporate with a single decision. The days leading up to the gala unfolded with an almost eerie quiet. Like the stillness before a monsoon, Amara moved through her schedule with graceful precision: meetings, contract evaluations, consultations, site reviews, her mind working tirelessly behind calm eyes. She was not plotting revenge, she was fulfilling duty. But the lines between the two blurred more each day, as Jude's actions grew bolder and his delusions grew louder. Jude, oblivious to the storm gathering around him, strutted through life with the entitlement of a man who believed the world had already crowned him king. He spent money as though the $800 million contract was already in his pocket. He spoke to employees as though expansion was guaranteed. And he treated Amara as though she were his administrative assistant, someone to be summoned, dismissed, ignored. He didn't notice, perhaps didn't care, that Amara had become quieter, more observant, more distant. She was no longer trying to salvage their marriage. She was gathering strength, gathering clarity. But Jude saw her silence as weakness, proof that she had finally accepted her place beneath him. Meanwhile, the independent auditors worked diligently. They investigated every subcontractor Jude listed. They traced every figure he inflated. They matched material costs with industry averages and uncovered discrepancies so large that they bordered on intentional fraud. Amara received progress updates quietly, each new discovery chiseling away the last fragments of any loyalty she still held for her husband. One morning, a senior compliance officer approached her after a review meeting. "Mrs. Nwoko," he said carefully, "I feel obligated to commend you for stepping aside from this evaluation. Many people would have used their position to help a spouse. Your transparency has ensured fairness." His respect warmed her, but also reminded her of the weight she carried. "Thank you," she replied simply. "Integrity is not for convenience. It's for moments like this." He nodded deeply, unaware of the personal battlefield behind her words. As the audit neared completion, one particular discovery stood out. A subcontractor Jude partnered with had a history of collapsing buildings in 2 separate cities. Corners had been cut, materials cheapened, safety protocols ignored, all to save money. People had died, and yet Jude had willingly listed them, knowing their background, because they offered him a lucrative under-the-table arrangement. The file containing that information sat open on her desk for a long time. Her father's face flickered in her memory, his smile, his work boots, the pride in his voice. When he talked about building structures that would last generations, then came the memory she avoided whenever possible, the phone call announcing his death. Faulty scaffolding, substandard bolts, a contractor who cut costs to increase profit margins. A tragedy labeled an unfortunate structural oversight. Amara felt something tighten deep inside her chest, a mixture of grief, anger, and revelation. Jude was not just unethical, he was the same kind of man whose choices had stolen her father. She stared at the documents as if they were a mirror reflecting the deepest truth she had refused to see. Jude didn't just betray her marriage, he betrayed her principles, her family, her legacy. As acting director, she had the authority to present her findings to the full infrastructure board. It was a responsibility she did not take lightly. She spent the next 48 hours preparing every file, cross-checking every fact, and ensuring that nothing she submitted could be dismissed as personal bias. On the morning she submitted the final audit to the board, she did something she hadn't done in months. She prayed, not for vengeance, but for strength. "Let me do what is right," she whispered, "even if it breaks my heart further." The board reviewed the findings with shock. One member even removed his glasses in disbelief. "This is catastrophic," he muttered. If this had slipped through. He didn't finish the sentence. Everyone at the table understood. Public lives were at stake. Another board member, an elderly woman with a commanding presence, looked at Amara with profound respect. "Your objectivity in this matter is admirable," she said. "You saved this institution from a major scandal." But Amara did not feel victorious. Her voice remained steady, but her spirit felt heavier. "This is not about my marriage," she said calmly. "This is about protecting the public, protecting lives, protecting the trust our communities place in us." The room fell silent in acknowledgement. A vote was taken unanimous. Jude's company was disqualified immediately, barred from future tenders for 3 years, and flagged for financial investigation. The decision would not be announced publicly until the upcoming gala, where the final shortlist of approved contractors would be revealed. The board felt this was appropriate, given the event's visibility and expectations from financiers. To them, it was strategic timing. To Amara, it was poetic timing. Yet even then, she did not wish to humiliate Jude. She only intended to let the truth stand. But Jude was destined to be his own downfall. 2 nights before the gala, Jude returned home drunk. He reeked of whiskey and arrogance. Zuri had accompanied him, as she often did now, a shadow of temptation, whispering poison into his ear. When Amara asked Jude if he intended to bring Zuri to the gala, a formal event for diplomats and ministers, he scoffed. "Why shouldn't I?" he said, dropping onto the sofa with a lazy smile. "Everyone knows our marriage is over in everything but paperwork. Zuri is the face of my future. Besides, you'll be too busy smiling for the cameras, right?" He spoke as though she were insignificant, a faded accessory replaced by a newer model. Zuri giggled, draping herself over him like a trophy. Amara did not answer. She simply watched them, her composure so complete that Jude mistook it for defeat. He wouldn't understand until much later that real strength is quiet, not loud. On the morning of the gala, Jude strutted around the house like a man preparing for coronation. He wore a tailored suit, purchased on credit he had no intention of paying. Zuri wore a gown so tight it seemed to cut her breath short, an intentional provocation meant to eclipse Amara's elegance. Before leaving, Jude stopped at the staircase, smirked at Amara, and said, "I hope you'll at least applaud politely when they announce Maloro construction tonight." Amara met his eyes with a calm so deep it unsettled him. "I won't need to applaud," she said softly. "The truth speaks loud enough on its own." He frowned, confused but dismissive. He didn't understand. He couldn't understand. And so they arrived at the Aurora Charity Gala. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead. Soft jazz filled the grand hall. Diplomats, ambassadors, ministers, and investors mingled with the ease of people who believed themselves untouchable. Jude walked in like royalty, Zuri clinging to him, wearing a smile sharpened with triumph. But as they made their entrance, something unusual happened. People whispered, people stared, people moved aside not out of admiration, but curiosity. They were not looking at Jude, they were looking at Amara. Her presence radiated quiet authority. She wore a black satin gown, simple yet majestic, her posture straight, her chin slightly lifted. Her expression revealed nothing, not pain, not anger, not fear. Only certainty, a certainty Jude had never possessed. He approached her with the swagger of a man who believed he already owned the night, and it was in that moment, right before the entire scandal began unraveling, that the threads of humiliation, betrayal, manipulation, and greed converged. Inside this glittering hall, the final fracture in their marriage was about to be exposed, and Jude, without knowing it, was moments away from losing everything he had ever used to define his worth. Everything. The lights inside the Aurora Charity Gala shimmered like liquid gold as guests continued to arrive, unaware that the most explosive scandal of the year was minutes from unfolding. Amara glided through the crowd with the regal calm of a woman who had already made her peace with the truth. She did not need to raise her voice. She did not need to match Jude's arrogance. Her silence alone carried more power than his loudest boasts. Meanwhile, Jude basked in attention like a man stepping into the throne room of his destiny. Everywhere he walked, he stopped to shake hands, pose for photos, and brag subtly about big news to be revealed tonight. Zuri strutted beside him as though she were the rightful heiress to an empire she didn't help build. Her dress sparkled aggressively, her perfume thick enough to announce her presence before she spoke. Several guests whispered uneasily, noticing Jude's companion. Some looked toward Amara, unsure how she felt or what she knew. But she did not glance at Zuri once. Her focus was elsewhere, on the ministers arriving, on the board members gathering near the presentation hall, on the papers tucked neatly inside her evening clutch. Those papers contained the official audit results. The downfall of Maloro Construction rested quietly beside her lipstick. Jude, oblivious and intoxicated by his own ego, drifted through the evening stacked with illusions. Every polite smile directed his way reinforced his belief that victory was already in his hands. When a wealthy businessman approached to congratulate him on the rumors circulating, Jude grinned broadly. "Well," he said, raising his glass, "I can't comment on confidential board decisions, but let's just say sometimes preparation meets opportunity." Amara overheard the conversation from across the room, yet her expression didn't change. Her stillness unnerved people more than Jude's arrogance. A diplomat leaned toward her discreetly. "Mrs. Nwoko, if I may ask, did your husband really bring another woman here tonight?" Amara inhaled softly, her voice low and poised. "Mr. Maloro makes his own choices. And you," the diplomat pressed gently. She lifted her chin. "So do I." Her answer lingered heavier in the air than any confrontation could have. Moments later, the event coordinator announced that dinner would soon be served. Guests began making their way to assigned tables. Jude, Zuri, and Amara coincidentally ended up near each other. Jude's choice, not the coordinator's. Jude insisted he and Amara should appear united for the cameras. But the real reason was simpler. He wanted to flaunt Zuri in front of her. Zuri leaned in close to Jude, whispering so loudly that the table could hear. "Baby, your suit looks incredible tonight. I can't wait for them to announce your name. Everyone will finally see who the real visionary is." Jude smirked, placing an arm around her waist as though claiming a prize. A few guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. One older woman shot Jude a glare so sharp it could have sliced glass. Still, Jude remained blissfully proud of his performance. Amara sat gracefully, her fork resting untouched. She listened to the rising chatter around the room, some praising the gala, others discussing business, but her pulse remained steady. She was not nervous, she was ready. Then Jude made his move. As the table settled, he turned to Amara with a loud, mocking smile. "You look lovely tonight," he said, each word dripping with false sweetness. "I was worried you wouldn't come. After all, this is a big night for me." Some guests stiffened. Amara simply replied, "Yes, it is a significant night." Zuri giggled. "Significant? More like legendary. When they announce Maloro Construction as the top contractor, it's going to change everything. The media will go crazy. We'll be everywhere. The word stabbed deeper than any insult. Amara lowered her gaze briefly, not in submission, but in reflection. Then she looked up, eyes steady as polished stone. "We will see." Jude misread her calm again. He chuckled condescendingly. "Don't worry, Amara. Even if you're not the star tonight, I'll make sure they mention you as the supportive wife." The table fell silent. A younger councilman muttered under his breath, "This is painful to watch." But the pain had only just begun. Minutes later, the master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage. Conversations quieted. Forks paused. Lights dimmed slightly, as a spotlight illuminated the center of the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host announced, "thank you for joining us tonight. Before we continue the scheduled fundraising program, the Infrastructure Board has requested a brief moment to share an important update regarding the Harbor City expansion project." Every head turned toward the board members standing near the stage. Jude straightened with pride, his chest rising. He pulled Zuri closer, whispering, "This is it, baby." Amara watched him without blinking. The host continued, "We know many of you have anticipated the announcement of approved contractors. Tonight, we will officially recognize the companies shortlisted for the final phase." The air thickened with expectation. Jude placed a hand on the table, ready to rise when his name was called. But instead of announcing winners, the host cleared his throat and said, "Before we reveal the shortlisted companies, the board must share that one major applicant has been disqualified due to significant integrity concerns discovered during the audit process." Jude froze. A ripple of shock passed through the room. The host continued carefully. "The disqualified applicants submitted financial documentation and subcontractor declarations that were found to be misrepresented. The discrepancies were severe enough to warrant not only disqualification but further investigation." Zuri blinked several times, her smile faltering. Jude's grip on the table tightened. Some guests looked at Amara instinctively. She remained perfectly still. Then the host said the words that shattered the illusion completely. "The disqualified company is Maloro Construction." A gasp erupted across the ballroom. Zuri's painted smile vanished entirely. Jude shot to his feet, his face twisting with disbelief. "What? This is a mistake. This is an attack. Who approved this nonsense?" The board members did not flinch. "It is final," one of them said. "Your submission failed integrity standards. The evidence is overwhelming." Jude turned toward Amara, fury burning through every vein. "You knew about this. You did this." Amara stood slowly. Her movements were smooth, deliberate, unshaken. "I did not disqualify you," she said. "Your actions did." Jude's voice cracked with rage. "Liar! You think you can stand there and pretend you're innocent. You set me up. You turned everyone against me." Guests stared in shock. Zuri backed away slightly, distancing herself from the sinking ship beside her. Jude stepped closer to Amara, breathing heavily. "You destroyed my legacy." Amara held his gaze with unwavering strength. "No, Jude. You destroyed it when you chose greed over integrity." The ballroom buzzed with whispers. Some guests recorded the scene, unable to look away. Jude snapped. In a fit of humiliation and fury, he spat at Amara again. Right there, in front of ministers, diplomats, cameras, journalists, the hall gasped as if the walls themselves recoiled. This time, Amara didn't merely wipe her cheek. She lifted her chin higher, and then she walked toward the stage. Every step was a declaration. Every breath was a reclaiming of dignity. She took the microphone with the poise of a queen addressing her kingdom. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice calm, "the purpose of leadership is not to serve personal ambition, but to uphold the trust of our communities." Her eyes briefly met Jude's trembling figure. Tonight's decision was not made lightly, but it was necessary. The crowd erupted not with applause yet, but with respect so heavy It filled the room like thunder just before rain, and Jude, the man who believed he owned the world, stood powerless, suffocating beneath the weight of his own downfall. The humiliation he had prepared for her was now swallowing him whole, and the night was far from over. The silence that followed Amara's calm, resonant speech was unlike anything the Aurora Gala had ever witnessed. It wasn't empty silence. It was charged, electrified, trembling with the force of everything unspoken. Guests stared at her with awe, at Jude with disgust, and at each other with the realization that they had just seen the collapse of a man who once believed himself untouchable, but the night had only begun its descent into irreversible consequences. Jude stood frozen in place, his chest heaving as if he'd been punched. His face was twisted not with shame, but with the raw, almost animal panic of a man watching his kingdom crumble. His hands shook violently. His pupils darted around the room, searching for allies, for someone to validate his outrage, but all he found were furtive glances and stiffened backs. No one wanted to be associated with a man exposed so publicly. Even Zuri, who had clung to his arm all evening, now stepped away, her heels clicking softly as she put distance between them. Her face paled beneath layers of makeup. She wanted no part of the scandal. Jude saw it, saw her abandoning him, and something deep inside him snapped. "You're all hypocrites," he shouted, voice cracking under the weight of humiliation. "All of you knew I deserved that contract. You knew my vision was better than anyone's. This is political sabotage, jealousy. That's what this is." His voice echoed against crystal chandeliers, but the only response was the subtle widening of eyes and the quick turning of heads. Security began moving subtly toward the edges of the room, prepared for escalation. Amara watched him from the stage, but her expression did not change. She looked neither triumphant nor vindictive. There was sorrow there, but also a firm, unshakable resolve. She had made peace with the consequences long before this moment. Jude's collapse was not her victory. It was the natural outcome of the path he had chosen. The host, trembling visibly, tried to regain control of the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we ask for calm. This is highly inappropriate." Jude lunged forward and snatched the microphone from his hands. "Quiet," he roared. "Everyone here benefits from corruption. Don't act innocent now." But before he could continue, Ambassador Chukwuma, an elder statesman known for both wisdom and zero tolerance for misconduct, stepped forward. Even before he spoke, the entire hall fell into respectful silence. He fixed Jude with a stare so direct that Jude's breath hitched. "Young man," he said, voice deep and steady, "you have disgraced not only yourself tonight, but the values this institution stands for. You speak of vision, but what vision builds on lies? You speak of sabotage, yet you sabotage your own future with greed." There was no anger in the ambassador's tone, only disappointment, which pierced Jude far deeper than rage could have. "Sit down," Ambassador Chukwuma commanded quietly. "Gather what dignity remains to you." Jude's lips trembled. For a moment, he looked like a lost boy rather than the arrogant CEO he pretended to be. But pride, wounded and bleeding, would not allow him to sit. Instead, he hurled the microphone onto the floor, where it clattered loudly, the sound sharp and final. He stormed out of the ballroom. Cameras flashed. People gasped. Security followed at a distance, and through it all, Amara did not move. Only after Jude vanished from view did the hall burst into murmurs, shaken, frantic, incredulous. Board members rushed to her side. "Mrs. Nwoko, we are so sorry you had to endure this," one said, voice tight with concern. Another added, "Your composure tonight was extraordinary. You prevented this from becoming even worse." She nodded graciously. "Thank you. Please continue with the event. The focus should be on the fund's mission, not on me." But the truth was, the damage had already overshadowed everything else. People whispered, not just about the scandal, but about the deeper tragedy of a marriage destroyed by ambition. Some expressed admiration for Amara's strength. Others whispered sympathy for her pain. And while the gala resumed haltingly, Its energy had shifted completely. It was no longer a celebration, it was a reckoning. After fulfilling her official responsibilities, Amara quietly stepped out of the ballroom and into a side corridor where no cameras could follow. Her hands trembled ever so slightly now that she was out of the public eye. She pressed one hand to her sternum, breathing through the weight of everything that had unfolded. She had not cried in years, not since the early days of her father's passing. But tonight, emotion pressed against her ribs with fierce insistence. She inhaled deeper, steadying herself. She had endured humiliation, betrayal, and heartbreak, and she had stood through it all. She would not collapse now. Amara, the voice came from behind her. She turned to see board director Miriam Okoro approaching, one of the most respected women in their field. Her eyes were filled not with pity, but with profound respect. "You did the right thing," Miriam said gently. "Right things don't always feel righteous," Amara whispered. "No," Miriam agreed, touching her shoulder. "But they remain right." There was a beat of silence. "We will support you," Miriam continued. "In the investigation, in the media fallout, in every step that comes next. You are not alone," Amara nodded, though a shadow of sadness crossed her gaze. "Thank you, but tonight, I think I need a moment alone." Miriam squeezed her hand. "Take all the time you need." When Miriam left, Amara exhaled shakily. The corridor was dim, illuminated only by the soft golden glow of wall sconces. In that quiet, a wave of exhaustion washed over her physical, emotional, spiritual. She had spent years trying to uphold a marriage built on lies, years defending a man who had done nothing to deserve her loyalty. Tonight had broken that final thread, and though she felt freer than she had in a long time, freedom also carried grief. As she closed her eyes, footsteps approached. She opened them to see Zuri standing a few yards away, clutching her purse with trembling fingers. Gone was the arrogance, the smirk, the false superiority. She looked shaken, human, vulnerable. I didn't know," Zuri whispered. Amara regarded her silently. Zuri swallowed hard. I didn't know it would be like this. I thought he was just successful, stressed, misunderstood. He told me you didn't care about him. He told me your marriage was over," Amara answered softly. "People who lie about their integrity usually lie about their relationships too." Zuri's face crumpled slightly. "I didn't expect this humiliation. I didn't think he would spit on you. In public, I didn't think he was capable." "He was always capable," Amara said. "You just saw the version he needed you to see." Zuri looked down at her trembling hands. "I'm sorry. I'm not the one you need to apologize to," Amara replied. Zuri nodded slowly, then stepped aside as Amara walked past her. Their brief exchange ended not with hostility, but with a quiet acknowledgement of shared tragedy, different roles in the same story of a man's downfall. Outside the ballroom, the night air was cool and crisp. The city lights glowed like scattered jewels across the horizon. Amara inhaled deeply, letting the breeze carry away the last remnants of tension from her shoulders. But even in her quiet moment of solitude, she sensed someone watching her. She turned. Jude stood a short distance away, leaning against the stone railing like a man whose entire structure had collapsed. His hair was disheveled. His eyes were red, not from tears, but from the rage he didn't know how to release. "Amara," he croaked. She said nothing. He approached slowly, shoulders slumped. "You ruined me." Amara met his gaze steadily. "You ruined yourself. You chose lies. You chose greed. You chose disrespect. I did it for us," he snapped. "For us," she repeated, her voice soft but piercing. "When you humiliated me, when you betrayed me, when you spat on me in front of hundreds of people." He flinched, but pride held him upright. "You could have let me fix it," he muttered. "But you exposed everything." "I didn't expose you," she said. "Your actions did. I only refused to cover them." For a moment Jude looked as though he might fall to his knees. His voice cracked. "I thought you loved me." "I did," she whispered. "But love cannot survive where respect is murdered." Those words hit him harder than any punishment the board could deliver. He reached out a trembling hand. "Please, don't leave me." She stepped back. "You lost me long before tonight." And with that, she turned away. Jude remained frozen, watching her walk toward the elevator, the woman he had underestimated, broken, manipulated, and publicly degraded. The woman who now stood taller than him in every conceivable way. As the elevator doors closed behind her, Jude realized the truth. The empire he thought she needed him for was only standing because she had never stopped holding it together. Now that she had let go, everything he built, everything he lied for was destined to collapse, and the next wave of consequences was already on its way. The days after the gala unfolded like the long echo of a gunshot, slow, unavoidable, and devastating. News outlets across the continent erupted with headlines about the scandal at the Aurora Charity Gala. Video clips of Jude's outburst circulated on every platform, capturing frame by frame the moment he spat on Amara, the moment he screamed accusations, the moment the board publicly denounced his company for fraud. Comment sections burned with condemnation. Former business partners scrambled to distance themselves. Investors withdrew silently overnight. But Jude didn't understand the full gravity of his downfall until the following morning. He sat in his office, a luxury space he had decorated to look like a king's sanctuary, surrounded by trembling assistants who didn't dare speak. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, and his hair matted. He had not slept. Rage kept him awake. Shame kept him restless, and fear kept him chained to silence. His phone buzzed non-stop, but not with opportunities or praise as it once had. Instead, resignations from staff, cancellations from investors, questions from journalists, threats of subpoenas, demands for explanations. One message struck him hardest. "The bank has frozen your accounts pending review." He slammed his fist onto the desk, knocking over an expensive pen holder. "This is her doing," he muttered. "She wants to destroy me. She wants me crawling." But even as he said it, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered the truth he refused to face. "You did this. She just stopped protecting you." He buried the thought beneath anger. When his business partner, Leamy, entered the office with shaking hands, Jude glared at him. "You'd better tell me you're here to fight this mess." Leamy's expression was grim. "I'm here to tell you the board wants you removed as CEO effective immediately. They're filing charges of financial misconduct. I can't protect you from this one." Jude's mouth dropped open. "You're firing me from the company I built." "You didn't build anything," Leamy replied quietly. "Amara funded your early expansion. Amara opened doors for you. And you," he swallowed, "you spat on the one woman who had ever given you real strength." The words struck harder than any physical blow. Leamy placed a resignation letter on the desk. "I'm sorry, Jude. We're done." As he walked away, Jude's vision blurred. For the first time in years, he felt small, helpless, terrified. He stormed out of the office, desperate for something, anything to cling to. But as he walked the halls, employees avoided his gaze. People who once praised him now turned their backs. No one shook his hand. No one smiled. No one admired him. By the time he reached the elevators, he was invisible. That afternoon, he drove home with a kind of fury that bordered on madness, arriving at the mansion they once shared. He burst through the door, calling Amara's name, but the mansion echoed back. Emptiness. She wasn't there. Her belongings were gone, her closet empty, her bookshelves cleared, her favorite mug missing, her scent gone from the air. He felt something collapse inside him, not physically, but spiritually. His legs weakened. He sagged against the doorframe. She had left. She hadn't screamed. She hadn't taken revenge. She hadn't fought him. She had simply walked away. That hurt far more than anger would have. He wandered to their bedroom, where he found a single envelope on the pillow. He tore it open with trembling hands. "Jude, I hope someday you understand that love cannot survive without respect. You destroyed what we had long before the gala. You broke it piece by piece, with every lie, every insult, every betrayal. I stayed too long trying to fix something you had no intention of protecting. This is not punishment. This is liberation from pain, from fear, from you. I wish you healing, not ruin, but that path is yours to walk alone, Amara. He read it twice. Then a third time. His hands shook violently. He crumpled the letter, then smoothed it again as if trying to control something in his life. Anything at all, but nothing responded to him anymore. The next days blurred into a downward spiral. Jude could not stop. Investigators arrived with formal notices. The media spoke of him with disgust. Contractors who once begged for his attention now sued him to protect themselves. He tried calling Zuri, seeking comfort, but she blocked him. Her last message, a single sentence. I didn't sign up for a broke, disgraced man. He smashed his phone. The screen shattered. His reflection warped across broken glass, a distorted version of the man he thought he was. Meanwhile, Amara lived a very different reality. She stayed temporarily in a quiet penthouse overlooking the city, a space lent to her by a close friend. Far from the chaos, she found breathing room. She woke early, practiced yoga, drank tea, and began piecing her life back together, not as Jude's wife, not as a shadow behind a man, but as a leader stepping fully into her own identity. People reached out with support. Colleagues applauded her bravery. Women from across the continent wrote messages of gratitude. The board formally praised her integrity in an internal memo that circulated widely. Slowly, the public began to shift focus from Jude's downfall to Amara's strength. One evening, while reviewing documents for an upcoming project, she received a message from her mother. Proud of you, my daughter. Your father would have been proud too. You honored his legacy. Tears filled her eyes for the first time since the gala, not from pain, but from healing. Her father had died because someone took shortcuts, and she had stopped history from repeating itself. That thought steadied her heart. But even as she rebuilt, Jude descended deeper into ruin. He avoided public spaces, hiding behind curtains when journalists came knocking. Bills piled up. Debt collectors sent warnings. His home's electricity was cut briefly before he managed to pay a portion of the balance. His staff left one by one. The company website removed his name. For a man who had once strutted through life believing he was above consequences, the fall was devastating. He thought about calling Amara countless times, to beg, to apologize, to scream, to ask for help. But deep down, he knew she owed him nothing. He remembered her final words. You lost me long before tonight. She had spoken the truth. One night, unable to bear the silence of the mansion, he drove aimlessly until he found himself parked outside the African Infrastructure Development Fund headquarters. He stared up at the glass building, illuminated like a monument to principles he never respected. Then he saw her. Amara stepped out of the building, accompanied by two colleagues, her posture elegant, her smile gentle, not arrogant, not triumphant, just peaceful. Jude lowered himself in his car seat, watching her. His eyes filled with hot, burning tears, the kind that come not from anger, but from realization. She looked free, and he looked lost. As she stepped into a waiting car, and the doors closed softly behind her, Jude whispered to himself, I should have protected you, not destroyed you. The weight of those words crushed him. He had treated a queen like a stepping stone, and now he stood alone in the ruins she refused to drown in. The next chapter of his downfall and her ascendancy was inevitable, and neither of their lives would ever be the same again. In the weeks that followed, the scandal no longer belonged to the whispers of boardrooms or the gossip of elite circles. It became national conversation. Jude's name trended for all the wrong reasons. News stations replayed the gala footage with heavy commentary from analysts who dissected every second of his public meltdown. Ethics experts criticized his fraudulent proposal. Psychologists weighed in on his violent outburst. Women's advocacy groups condemned the humiliation he inflicted on Amara. If Jude once believed himself invincible, the world now reminded him he was anything but. And still, the consequences kept unfolding. On a gray Monday morning, investigators from the anti-corruption unit arrived at his mansion with stern expressions and a thick envelope of warrants. They combed through files, seized electronics, interviewed staff, and carried away boxes of documents. Jude watched helplessly, pacing, sweating, cursing under his breath. "This is harassment," he muttered, as an investigator photographed his safe. "You're all out to destroy me." The lead investigator didn't look up. "We're here because you lied on official financial statements. This is not harassment. This is accountability." The word hit him like a slap. Accountability, something he had never imagined would catch up to him. As they left, one investigator handed him a notice. He was required to appear for a formal hearing within 30 days. The penalties for conviction included heavy fines, business sanctions, and potential imprisonment. He felt the world tilting beneath his feet. He staggered backward until he bumped into the hallway wall, palms pressed to his temples as if he could hold his collapsing life together with his bare hands. When the door closed behind the investigators, the mansion fell into suffocating silence. He whispered bitterly, "Amara did this to me." But even he no longer believed that fully. Meanwhile, Amara's world blossomed in ways she had not expected so soon. She was invited to speak at a global infrastructure forum, where she addressed corruption in development projects with calm authority. Her panel received a standing ovation. A leading digital magazine featured her as one of the top 10 women reshaping Africa's urban future. Her voice became a symbol of principled leadership in a space too often plagued by greed. Yet, despite the positive wave around her, she maintained humility. She spent her evenings working quietly in her borrowed penthouse, reading proposals, refining strategies, and seeking ways to ensure transparency across all upcoming projects. She poured herself into work, not to escape pain, but to build something noble out of it. One afternoon, the board director, Miriam Okoro, visited her office. "You have handled this storm with courage," Miriam said, "but I hope you're also taking time to heal." Amara smiled gently. "Healing comes in many forms. For me, working with integrity is part of it." Miriam regarded her with admiration. "The board will vote next month on a permanent director. I shouldn't say anything prematurely, but your name has been mentioned more than any other." Amara's eyes widened slightly. "I'm honored. You earned it," Miriam replied. "And the world is watching." But the world was also watching Jude, and they were not watching kindly. With each passing day, more cracks in his empire surfaced. A subcontractor testified that Jude pressured him to falsify material receipts. A former accountant admitted she'd been instructed to manipulate cost estimates. 3 board members from a previous project resigned preemptively, fearing association. The media labeled him the fallen pharaoh. He hated the nickname, hated the world, hated himself most of all. But there was still one person he hadn't faced directly since the night of the gala, Amara. She had filed for divorce quietly, serving him papers through a law firm. No dramatic confrontation, no bitter notes, just a clean, dignified severing of a bond long since dead. When Jude received the envelope, he ripped it open violently. His eyes scanned the papers, then fell onto the signature line where Amara had written her name in calm, unwavering strokes. He sank onto the sofa, gripping the papers with trembling fingers. How did he end up here? He used to imagine they would build a legacy together, 2 powerful people shaping the future of cities. Now he sat alone in a mansion paid for with debt, his future shrinking like dust slipping through his fingers. Memories he had long ignored began resurfacing. The first time Amara defended his pitch when an investor belittled him, the nights she stayed up helping him prepare presentations, the mornings she encouraged him when he doubted himself. The kindness in her voice, when she once said, "Your vision matters. Don't give up." He had forgotten all of that. He had taken her support not as generosity, but as entitlement. He had not loved her. He had consumed her. That realization struck him so hard he dropped the divorce papers, squeezing his eyes shut as pain surged inside him. Not physical pain, something worse, something piercing, something raw. Regret, real, visceral regret. He looked around the mansion, the grand living room, the expensive art pieces, the golden decorations, and suddenly, everything felt hollow. as if none of it had ever belonged to him, as if it had all been borrowed from a life he didn't deserve. The next day, unable to bear the silence, he drove to see Amara. He parked on the street near her penthouse, rehearsing what he could say. He paced. He hesitated. He tried breathing exercises. He failed. Finally, he approached the building entrance, but as he reached for the buzzer, he saw her through the glass doors walking into the lobby with 2 board members, smiling as they discussed plans. She looked radiant, centered, whole. As he froze, she turned slightly and caught sight of him through the glass. Their eyes met for the first time since the gala. For a moment, time paused. There was no anger in her gaze, no fear, no longing, only clarity, as if she saw him not as her husband, not as the man who hurt her, but simply as someone from a chapter she had finally closed. He lifted a trembling hand in a hesitant wave. She didn't return it. She simply nodded politely, then turned away and continued walking. That small gesture, so calm, so final, hit Jude like a blade between the ribs. He stepped back from the door, heart pounding. Something inside him shattered the moment she walked out of sight. Tears blurred his vision. For years, he thought of himself as strong, powerful, unstoppable. Yet here he was, unable to withstand the strength of a woman who no longer needed him, feared him, or thought of him. He stumbled back to his car and sat motionless, gripping the steering wheel. That evening, after returning to the empty mansion, he finally broke. He fell to his knees on the cold marble floor, sobs tearing from his chest. "I'm sorry," he whispered into the silence. "I'm sorry, Amara," but she was not there to hear it. And even if she had been, her healing did not depend on his remorse. The next morning, Jude received an official letter notifying him of the formal investigation schedule. His presence was mandatory. Failure to appear would result in an arrest warrant. He pressed the letter to his forehead, trembling. There was no escaping this. He had to face everything he had tried to outrun. Meanwhile, Amara received a different letter, one informing her that she had unanimously been recommended as the permanent director of the Regional Urban Expansion Program. Her journey was ascending just as Jude's descended. 2 lives, once intertwined, now moving in opposite directions, and the gap between them would only widen from here. The morning of Jude's mandatory hearing arrived with a heavy, metallic sky that hung low over the city. Rain threatened but did not fall. Only clouds gathered, thick and oppressive, mirroring the dread building in Jude's chest. He stood before the mirror in his dimly lit bedroom, staring at the reflection of a man he barely recognized. His once impeccable suits now looked like costumes borrowed from a better version of himself. His eyes were hollow, his skin pale, and his hands trembled when he tried adjusting his tie. For years, he had commanded rooms with swagger. Now, he feared even the echo of his own footsteps. He tried to steady his breathing, muttering under his breath, "You can fix this. You can fix anything." But the words held no power. His voice sounded foreign, thin, shaky, defeated. Finally, he forced himself to leave the house. As he stepped outside, the security cameras that once gave him a sense of prestige now felt like witnesses to his downfall. His car, which used to gleam in the driveway, was covered in fine dust, a sign he hadn't been living, only surviving. He drove slowly, his mind spinning with memories, regrets, and imagined scenarios in which everything hadn't gone so wrong. He thought of Amara, her grace, her strength, the quiet dignity she carried like a crown. He thought of the way she looked at him through the glass door at her penthouse, not with anger, but with the finality of someone who had stepped beyond him. As he approached the anti-corruption unit building, his stomach tightened. The entrance was swarming with journalists, cameras flashing like bursts of lightning, microphones extended toward him as he stepped out of the car. "Mr. Maloro, do you deny the fraud allegations? Is it true you falsified cost reports? Did your wife help expose your misconduct? Are you prepared for possible criminal charges?" He tried to push through, shielding his face, but the voices pressed in relentlessly. Each question felt like a blow, striking places in him that were already bruised. Inside the building, he waited in a cold hallway, with other individuals scheduled for questioning. Most recognized him. Their whispers were soft but unmistakable. "That's him. The one from the Gala." He spat on his wife, can you imagine? "He's finished. Completely finished." He clenched his fists until his nails cut into his palms. At last, an officer called his name. "Jude Maloro. This way." The hearing room was stark white walls, a long wooden table, and 3 officials seated like judges. They were not emotional, not hostile, not sympathetic. They were simply doing their job. Jude sat down, palms sweating. A woman at the center opened a file. "Mr. Maloro, this hearing concerns allegations of financial misrepresentation, procurement fraud, and falsification of construction safety declarations. Do you wish to make a statement before we begin?" Jude swallowed. His voice cracked. "This is all a misunderstanding." The woman raised an eyebrow. "Is that your official statement?" He hesitated. I didn't mean for things to go wrong. I was under pressure." One official leaned forward. "Pressure does not justify fraud, nor does it explain the documented evidence showing intentional manipulation." Jude felt himself shrinking. Sweat dotted his forehead. "I didn't intend harm. I just needed to secure the contract." "So you admit the misrepresentation?" the woman pressed. He froze. The word admit felt like a death sentence. I don't know." She closed the folder calmly. "Then let us proceed with the evidence." For the next 2 hours, they dissected every line of his proposal, every discrepancy, every forged signature, every subcontractor conflict. Each revelation sliced deeper into him. He tried explaining, justifying, deflecting, but the truth was too clear, too damning. When the questioning ended, the lead officer spoke. "We will issue our final decision in writing. However, Mr. Maloro, based on what we've examined, I suggest you prepare for significant legal consequences." Jude nodded numbly, the words echoing like a hammer striking cold metal. When he left the building, the journalists swarmed again. He rushed to his car, nearly tripping. Cameras captured every second of his collapse, broadcasting it to the world as he slammed the door and curled over the steering wheel. He stayed like that for several minutes, shaking. He could not deny it anymore. His life was crumbling. His career was collapsing. His reputation was poisoned beyond repair. And Amara had walked forward without ever looking back. When he finally lifted his head, he noticed something odd. His phone was buzzing nonstop, not with messages, but with missed calls from his bank, his lawyer, and several creditors. One notification made his blood run cold. Account overdrawn. Immediate action required. He dropped the phone. The empire he had once claimed he built with his brilliance had never truly been his. It was propped up by Amara's guidance, Amara's support, Amara's connections. Without her, everything fell apart like a poorly constructed wall. He drove aimlessly, unable to return to the mansion. By evening, he found himself at the waterfront, the same one he had proposed to Amara at 3 years earlier. The wind was cold, salty, biting at his skin. He sat on a bench and stared at the waves, haunted by memories. The way she had laughed during their early dates, the way she had defended him in meetings, the way she believed in him more than he believed in himself, the way he destroyed her with every careless act. He had not just lost a wife or a reputation, he had lost the last piece of goodness anchoring his life, and though he knew it too late, regret surged through him like a storm tide. Meanwhile, miles away, Amara attended a private dinner with key members of the infrastructure board. The restaurant was quiet, candlelit, elegant. Miriam Okoro raised her glass toward Amara with a smile. "To courage," Miriam said, "and to leadership rooted in integrity." Others chimed in with warm words of admiration. But Amara's smile, though genuine, carried softness, not triumph. She felt no pleasure in Jude's suffering, only relief that she had stepped out of darkness. One of the board members asked gently, "Have you spoken to him at all?" She shook her head. I don't think there is anything left to say. Another member leaned forward. You saved countless lives by exposing that proposal. If it had been approved, entire communities would have lived in unsafe housing. Amara's gaze fell. She thought of her father again. Thank you. That's what matters most to me. As the dinner continued, something shifted inside her, a sense of renewal. She realized she no longer carried the weight of Jude's actions. She had released it when she walked away at the gala. She was free. Late that night, as she returned to her penthouse, she stood by the balcony overlooking the glowing city below. Her city, her responsibility, her future. She whispered softly into the breeze, "Thank you for the strength." At that same moment, Jude whispered into the wind at the waterfront, "I'm sorry." Their voices, one healing, one breaking, floated into the night, traveling in opposite directions, one rising, one sinking. Their lives had diverged completely, and the canyon between them would only deepen, but Jude's darkest chapter had not yet arrived. The days that followed Jude's hearing marked the true beginning of his collapse, slow, relentless, and merciless. The legal process tightened around him like a noose, each new development pulling harder on the threads of his remaining composure. Letters from creditors arrived daily. His lawyer resigned after Jude failed to pay outstanding fees. Several subcontractors he had once bribed turned on him, offering statements in exchange for leniency. And banks continued freezing his accounts until only a few $1,000s remained available. A man who once boasted about multi-million-dollar deals now hesitated before buying groceries. Worse still, the media no longer treated him with curiosity. They treated him with disdain. Every news headline dissected his fraudulent practices, his outburst at the gala, and his humiliating treatment of Amara. Commentators painted him as a symbol of everything wrong with corrupt leadership. Former admirers now called him a cautionary tale. At night, he lay awake in the cold expanse of his mansion, unable to sleep, unable to eat, unable to think clearly. He wandered through empty hallways like a ghost haunting his own life. Even the photographs on the walls seemed to mock him. Pictures of him shaking hands with ambassadors, smiling on construction sites, presenting blueprints with forced confidence. But none tormented him as much as the pictures with Amara. Her smile genuine, radiant, stood beside his arrogant smirk in every frame. Her hand rested gently on his arm, her gaze steady, her presence grounding. In those photos, he saw the man he could have been, if only he hadn't destroyed everything. One night, he ripped a framed photo off the wall. It shattered on the marble floor. He stared at the broken glass, breathing heavily, and whispered, "I'm sorry. Amara, I'm sorry." But the apology dissolved into the empty room. Meanwhile, Amara's life moved forward with a grace that bordered on poetic. She had been officially appointed as the permanent director of the Regional Urban Expansion Program. Her leadership was already praised for implementing stricter procurement standards, innovative designs for affordable housing, and transparent bidding protocols. New contractors, honest ones, lined up eagerly to work under her guidance. Her personal life, though still quiet, showed signs of healing. She enjoyed peaceful mornings with tea on her balcony. She attended yoga classes again. She had dinners with friends who reminded her she was more than her past suffering. The woman who once felt trapped beneath the shadow of a toxic marriage was now luminous, centered, free. One evening, after a long meeting, Miriam Okoro approached her with a warm smile. "You look lighter these days." Amara exhaled softly. "I feel lighter." Miriam nodded knowingly. Letting go of the wrong person will always make room for who you are meant to become. Amara considered the words for a moment. "I don't hate Jude," she murmured. "I just hope he finds clarity. Somehow, painful as it is." Miriam placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Compassion does not make you weak. It makes you unbreakable." But compassion could not mend what Jude had shattered. A week later, Jude faced another devastating blow. He arrived at his office to find the locks changed and a notice taped to the door. "Maloro Construction is under temporary management pending investigation. Unauthorized personnel are prohibited from entry. His pulse skyrocketed. He hammered at the door until a security guard approached and said, "Sir, you no longer have access to this building. This is my company," Jude roared. "You can't shut me out." The guard responded with calm resignation. "It hasn't been your company for weeks." Jude staggered back, as though he'd been struck. Rage welled up in him, hot, destructive. But beneath the anger simmered fear. He had always defined himself by power, success, and status. Now, stripped of all three, he didn't know who he was. He drove home with trembling hands, stopping only when tears blurred his vision too much to continue. He pulled over at a quiet intersection and buried his face in his hands, shoulders shaking. His phone buzzed. It was a message from his mother. "Jude, I heard what happened. Come home. We will figure things out. I still love you, my son." He squeezed his eyes shut, overwhelmed. His mother had always been gentle, forgiving, and hopeful. He had spent years avoiding her, ashamed of how he treated the family that raised him. Now, her message felt like a lifeline. But pride ruined. Battered pride made him whisper, "Not yet." Not until he had something to show her. Not until he had salvaged at least a fragment of his dignity. But dignity was a luxury he could no longer afford. That same evening, creditors arrived at his home with final notices. His mansion, purchased through loans and inflated financial statements, was scheduled for seizure. He had 30 days to vacate. He laughed an unhinged, hollow laugh, muttering, of course, everything leaves me." But the truth was harsher. Everything wasn't leaving him. He had driven everything away. 2 days later, he sat in the dark, flipping channels on the television when he froze. A news report covered Amara's recent keynote speech at an international urban development summit. She spoke about integrity in construction, community-centered design, and how leaders must serve the people, not exploit them. He watched her with a mixture of longing and devastation. She looked powerful, confident, fearless, everything he was not. He whispered her name like a prayer, Amara. Near the end of her speech, she said, "Development must never sacrifice ethics. Corruption kills communities before buildings even rise. Integrity is not a burden. It is the foundation of everything that will stand the test of time." Jude pressed a shaking hand against the screen. He felt something inside him break, not the angry snaps of ego, but the slow crumble of a man realizing the truth. He had loved power more than her. He had pursued ambition more than happiness. He had fed his pride until it devoured everything that mattered. He fell to his knees, tears streaming. Why did I do this? Why did I hurt her? Why didn't I stop? There was no answer, only silence. And loneliness so heavy it felt like drowning. Days turned into weeks. Jude's spiral deepened. He avoided calls, ignored notices, stopped checking emails. His refrigerator emptied. His electricity flickered. He slept in odd intervals, sometimes too long, sometimes not at all. He began losing weight. His clothes hung loosely on him. His hair grew unkempt. His eyes dulled. One afternoon, he walked through the mansion and realized something strange. He could hear his footsteps echo across every room. That was when he truly understood. He was alone, completely, utterly alone. He sank onto the floor of the living room, head bowed, breathing shaky. "I deserve this," he muttered. "I deserve all of it." But even in his darkest moment, he felt a faint spark inside him, raw, painful, but unmistakably human. Regret, self-awareness, the first fragile seed of humility. He whispered into the empty room, "I don't want to be this person anymore." That was the moment Jude finally broke, not with violence, not with arrogance, but with truth. He didn't need rescuing. He needed rebuilding. From the foundation up, and the journey to rock bottom was not over yet. But for the first time, beneath all the suffering, he felt a flicker of something he had lost long ago. The desire to change, rock bottom, Jude soon learned, was not a single moment. It was a landscape, vast, punishing, and filled with places lower than he ever imagined he could fall. The collapse of his company and reputation had been only the beginning. Now came the part no scandal prepares a man for: the slow, grinding erosion of pride, security, and identity. The mansion, his last symbol of power, was nearly empty. Furniture had been repossessed, artwork taken down. Rooms once filled with lavish parties now echoed with the hollow sound of loneliness. What remained were cardboard boxes, unpaid bills, and a future shrinking by the day. On a humid Thursday afternoon, the bank's final notice slipped under his door: eviction in 72 hours. He stared at the letter until the words blurred. His throat tightened until he couldn't breathe. The walls felt too close, pressing down on him like accusations. He stumbled into the kitchen and gripped the counter, fighting the panic rising in his chest. Once, people begged for his time. Now, he couldn't even convince a bank to give him one more week. He sat at the kitchen table, head buried in his hands. "How did I let it get this bad?" he whispered to the cold floor. There was no answer, only the hum of the refrigerator, struggling like everything else in the house. That evening, he forced himself outside. The air was thick with heat, and every step felt heavy. He walked aimlessly through the park near the mansion, watching families laugh, joggers pass by, and children chase each other under the shade of jacaranda trees. None of them knew him. None of them cared who he had been. None of them looked at him with awe or fear. For the first time in years, he felt like just another man, small, anonymous, unimportant. He sat on a bench and stared at the sunset folding into the horizon. His mind drifted to Amara. He wondered what she was doing at that moment, working, laughing, enjoying the peace she had long been denied. The thought warmed him and stabbed him all at once. A voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Jude." He turned. Lemmy, his former business partner, stood a few feet away. The man looked uncomfortable, unsure whether to approach or leave immediately. Jude managed a hollow smile. "Didn't expect to see you again." Lemmy hesitated, then sat beside him. "I heard about the eviction. News travels fast, doesn't it?" Jude muttered. Lemmy sighed. "I'm not here to gloat." "Why are you here?" Jude asked, though his tone carried no hostility, only exhaustion. "I wanted to tell you something," Lemmy replied softly. "I'm angry about the fraud. I'm angry you dragged the rest of us into this mess. But I'm even angrier about what you did to Amara." Jude flinched. "She lifted you higher than you ever could have climbed alone," Lemmy continued. "And you repaid her with arrogance, betrayal, and public humiliation." "I know," Jude whispered. His voice cracked. "Believe me, I know." For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Jude said, "I thought I deserved everything I got. The success, the admiration, the power. I thought I was meant for greatness. And now?" Lemmy asked. Jude closed his eyes. "Now I realize I wasn't even great enough to treat my wife with respect." The admission sat between them like a confession. Lemmy exhaled. "I hope you find a way to rebuild yourself. But that journey starts with acknowledging who you became." "I do acknowledge it," Jude murmured. "Every day, every night, it follows me everywhere." They sat in silence a bit longer before Lemmy stood. "Take care of yourself, Jude. This doesn't have to be the end, but it is your wake-up call." After Lemmy walked away, Jude remained on the bench until the sky turned black. Only when streetlights flickered on did he finally return to the mansion. He found an envelope taped to the door. It was from his mother, handwritten, "My son, I know you are hurting. Come home, pride will not save you. Let me help you start again, Mama." He pressed the letter to his chest and cried, not the furious tears of humiliation, but the deep, shuddering tears of a man finally facing himself. The next day, he began packing, not as a CEO forced out of his empire, but as a man letting go of the last pieces of a life he no longer deserved. He folded clothes mechanically, boxing away memories he wished he could rewrite. He found old cards from Amara, encouraging notes she had written, reminders of a love he had crushed with carelessness. He paused on one. "Whatever storm comes, remember, we face it together." He sank onto the floor, holding the card to his forehead. "Why didn't I protect you?" he whispered. "Why was I so blind?" By the time movers arrived to seize the mansion, he was ready, or at least as ready as a broken man could be. He stepped outside with 2 duffel bags, watching as officials cataloged the remaining valuables. The house, once his fortress, now looked like a stranger's property. He didn't fight, didn't argue, didn't scream. He simply walked to his car, carrying nothing of his former life, except regret. With nowhere else to go, he drove to a small, aging apartment complex on the outskirts of town. His mother had arranged a temporary place for him, a 1-bedroom unit barely furnished, with peeling paint and a shaky ceiling fan. But when he stepped inside, something unexpected washed over him. Relief. No cameras, no trophies, no marble floors echoing his loneliness. Just a quiet room where he could finally breathe. For the first time, humility felt like freedom. That night, he lay on a thin mattress, staring at the ceiling. The hum of distant traffic replaced the sterile silence of the mansion. He whispered into the dark, "Maybe this is where I begin again." But rebuilding would not be easy. The next morning, he woke early before the sun, before the noise of the city. He sat at the small kitchen table with a notebook in front of him. At first, his hands hesitated, but slowly, he began writing. Not excuses, not justifications, not rants. He wrote the truth. Every lie he had told, every shortcut he had taken, every cruelty he had inflicted on Amara, every moment where pride drowned reason. He wrote until his hand ached, until tears blurred the ink, until he felt something heavy begin to loosen inside him. He didn't know what he would do with the pages yet, but for the first time in his life, he was honest with himself. Later that afternoon, he drove to the waterfront again, partly out of habit, partly out of longing. He sat where he once proposed to Amara. Waves crashed softly along the rocks, rhythmic and unbothered by human ruin. And there, as he watched the horizon stretch endlessly before him, he whispered, "If there's any redemption left for me, I want to find it." He didn't expect forgiveness. He didn't expect Amara to ever look at him again. He didn't expect the world to forget the man he had been. But in that fragile whisper, there was something new. Humility, awareness, a desire for transformation. He was no longer running from consequences. He was walking toward them with the faint hope that someday, somewhere, he might earn enough grace to stand again. And though he didn't know it yet, this shift, quiet, trembling, sincere, would mark the beginning of a long, painful, honest journey, a journey toward becoming a man worthy of the life he destroyed. Amara's life, in contrast to Jude's downward spiral, began to settle into a gentle rhythm, marked by clarity, renewed purpose, and increasing recognition. But the transformation was not merely external. Inside her, a place once bruised by betrayal and exhaustion, there was now a quiet rebirth taking shape. Her morning started before sunrise. She would sit on her balcony, watching the sky soften from deep indigo to pale gold. The city stretched below her like a living tapestry, waking slowly, humming with the promise of another day. She found comfort in these small rituals, tea in both hands, steady breaths, her mind no longer spinning with anxieties. But healing wasn't passive. She worked for it. She attended weekly therapy sessions, where she unpacked years of emotional erosion. She confronted the ways she had tolerated cruelty out of love, patience, or hope. She learned to forgive herself for staying too long and to honor herself for finally walking away. Her therapist, a warm and perceptive woman named Dr. Kamene, often reminded her, "Strength is not enduring harm. Strength is choosing to no longer accept it." And each session carved a bit more space inside Amara for peace to settle. Her professional life flourished just as abundantly. Under her leadership, the Regional Urban Expansion Program entered a new era of accountability and innovation. She implemented digital transparency tools that allowed citizens to track progress of public construction projects. She cultivated partnerships with ethical builders who prioritized community needs over profit margins. She redesigned procurement guidelines to eliminate loopholes that once enabled corruption. People began calling her the woman redefining Africa's future. She didn't let the praise inflate her ego, but she accepted it with gratitude. One afternoon, she was invited to speak at a panel held at a prestigious university. Students filled the auditorium, eager to learn from her experience. The topic: integrity in public leadership. During the Q&A session, a young woman stood and asked, "How did you find the courage to expose wrongdoing when the person responsible was your own husband?" The room fell silent. Amara took a breath and answered with a calm sincerity that struck the audience. "Courage doesn't mean the absence of pain. It means choosing what is right despite the pain. And sometimes, the hardest person to hold accountable is the one we once loved. But when leadership is entrusted to you, loyalty to a person cannot outweigh loyalty to the people you serve." The auditorium erupted into applause, long, heartfelt, emotional. After the event, students lined up to thank her. Some shared personal stories of toxic relationships or family members who manipulated them. Others said her story inspired them to pursue leadership roles with integrity. Amara listened to every voice with genuine attention. She had once felt invisible in her marriage. Now, she made sure no one who spoke to her ever felt unheard. Meanwhile, Jude continued descending through a world stripped of illusions. He had moved into the small apartment provided by his mother's church community. It wasn't glamorous, but it was clean, safe, and temporary. Three comforts he hadn't recognized the value of until now. He spent most days in solitude, alternating between searching for odd jobs online and replaying memories of his old life like a film he no longer recognized himself in. The notebook he had begun filling with confessions grew thicker each day. Some pages detailed his unethical practices. Others explored childhood wounds he had never acknowledged. But many entries, perhaps most, revolved around Amara, her kindness, her intelligence, her unwavering moral compass, her belief in him before he destroyed it. He wrote apology letters he never sent. He wrote reflections he never showed anyone. He wrote because he didn't know what else to do. One evening, he attended a support group recommended by his mother. It was held in the basement of a community center, just 10 folding chairs arranged in a circle and a pot of bitter coffee. He sat quietly, unsure why he was even there. Then a man spoke about losing his job due to gambling. A woman spoke about leaving an abusive marriage. Another admitted to sabotaging her own career out of insecurity. For the first time, Jude saw pieces of himself in others' failures. He realized he wasn't unique in his downfall. He wasn't cursed. He wasn't targeted. He was human, and he had made choices that led him here. When it was his turn to speak, he hesitated. His voice came out small. "My name is Jude," he said. "And I ruined everything." A facilitator encouraged gently. "Tell us more if you're ready." Jude took a shaky breath. "I hurt the one person who ever believed in me. I built my entire life on lies and shortcuts, and when everything collapsed, I blamed everyone but myself." He wiped his eyes, embarrassed. But no one judged him. Instead, others nodded in empathy. His story was raw, but it was real, and speaking it aloud cracked something open inside him, something painful, but necessary. In the weeks that followed, he returned to the group regularly. He learned to listen, to reflect, to face his mistakes without spiraling into self-hate. Healing didn't come quickly, but it came steadily like water, carving new paths through hard earth. He even began volunteering at the community center, cleaning, organizing supplies, helping distribute food to families on weekends. No one there cared about his former title. They cared that he showed up, and Jude found unexpected solace in the simplicity of service. But despite the small steps forward, one question haunted him constantly. Should he apologize to Amara? Not as a gesture of reconciliation. He knew that door was forever closed. But as a final act of truth, a release, an acknowledgement of the wounds he inflicted. He didn't yet know what the right answer was, but the desire for closure grew stronger with each passing day. Back in her own rising world, Amara received an invitation that would set the stage for a pivotal moment in both their lives. The African Continental Leadership Summit, an international event attended by presidents, ministers, CEOs, and thought leaders, requested she deliver the keynote address on ethical development. It was the most prestigious invitation she had ever received. She accepted with humility, though privately, she felt the weight of responsibility pressing gently on her shoulders. She spent weeks preparing her speech, ensuring every word reflected truth, purpose, and hope. 2 days before the summit, she visited her mother. They cooked together, talked late into the evening, and reminisced about Amara's childhood, her father's teachings, her early dreams, her journey into leadership. "You've carried pain with dignity," her mother told her. "Now carry triumph with grace." Amara smiled. "I'll try." Her mother cupped her face lovingly. "You already have." On the morning of the summit, she dressed in a dignified navy gown with gold accents, a nod to strength and clarity. As she stepped into the grand hall, applause washed over her like warm sunlight. She saw faces from around the continent, leaders who trusted her, young women who admired her, colleagues who respected her. She felt embraced by purpose. As she prepared to take the stage, she glanced around the audience, and for a split second, her breath caught. Jude was there, not in the front rows, not among dignitaries, not dressed in the sleek suits he once flaunted. He sat near the back, wearing a modest shirt, looking smaller than she remembered, humbled, quiet, uncertain. Their eyes met. There was no spark of lingering affection, no bitterness, no triumph, only recognition. Recognition of a shared past, recognition of the distance between them, recognition of the ways they had changed. Jude didn't wave. He didn't plead. He simply bowed his head in respect. A silent apology. Amara inhaled, steadying herself. Then she stepped onto the stage, ready to speak not just to a continent but to her own past, her own pain, her own transformation. Her story was no longer about him. It was about who she had become and who she would continue to be. When Amara stepped onto the summit stage, the entire hall rose in applause. A wave of admiration so warm and unified, it felt like an embrace. Dozens of cameras pointed toward her, but she didn't see them. She saw the rows of young leaders leaning forward, ready to learn. She saw dignitaries nodding with respect. She saw ministers who had once doubted her, now waiting intently for her message. And somewhere in the back, she felt Jude's presence not as a shadow haunting her, but as a closed chapter watching her rise. She placed her notes gently on the podium, lifted her chin, and began. Her voice was clear, steady, strong. "Leadership," she said, "is not about power. It is about responsibility. It is not about fame. It is about impact. And it is never about what we can gain, but about what we can protect." The hall quieted completely. She continued, speaking from the deepest places of lived experience, not mentioning Jude, yet speaking to stories like hers that existed everywhere. Corruption is not a distant threat. It begins in silent moments when integrity is compromised for convenience, when accountability is ignored for profit, when self-interest outweighs service, and the consequences ripple through communities far beyond the decision-makers. People nodded solemnly. She slowed, allowing her next words to resonate. "I learned the hardest lessons, not from books or policies, but from my own life. From the painful realization that standing for what is right sometimes means standing alone. But loneliness in truth," she said, placing a hand over her heart, "is far better than companionship in corruption." A soft gasp rippled across the hall. "Integrity," she continued, "will cost you. It may cost you relationships, opportunities, comfort, even love. But the price of losing integrity is far greater. It is the loss of yourself." The hall erupted into applause again, but she lifted a gentle hand, asking for silence. She had more to say, words that had waited years for their release. "We must build not just cities, but character, not just roads, but responsibility, not just structures, but systems that protect the vulnerable from the powerful." Her voice softened, but her conviction sharpened. My father died because of a contractor who chose shortcuts over safety. He became one of thousands of nameless victims of corruption. His death was preventable. His life deserved better. She paused, steadying her breath as the audience held theirs. And because of him, I vowed to never tolerate dishonesty, even when it appears in those we love, even when it hurts. A quiet heaviness settled over the room. No one moved, no one coughed. Everyone listened with reverence. So I stand before you not as a perfect leader, but as a human being who has walked through fire and chose not to burn others in the process. Again, the applause thundered, but this time, Amara accepted it with a gentle bow of her head. When she ended her speech, the entire hall rose to their feet. People wiped tears from their eyes. Ministers exchanged glances of admiration. And near the back of the room, Jude stood too slowly, shakily, with a mixture of awe and heartbreak. He had come expecting to feel pain. He had not expected to feel pride. But as he watched her, this woman he had once belittled, once betrayed, he saw the truth. She was extraordinary. She always had been. He had just been too blind, too selfish, too insecure to see it. As attendees lined up to shake Amara's hand, Jude slipped out quietly, almost unnoticed. He walked through the lobby with his head lowered, the applause still ringing in his ears. It didn't belong to him. It never had. And for the first time, he accepted that. Outside, the afternoon sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm glow across the pavement. Jude stopped at the edge of the sidewalk and exhaled deeply, a breath that carried guilt, regret, and surrender all at once. He wasn't ready to face Amara. Not yet, not today. But he had heard her, and he had seen her, and something inside him shifted further toward humility. He walked away with slow, weighted steps. Inside the summit hall, Amara was surrounded by leaders offering congratulations, students asking for guidance, and journalists eager to feature her in major publications. Yet, beneath the celebration, she felt a gentle, quiet awareness that Jude had attended. She had seen his bowed head before he slipped out. She had felt the heaviness of his presence, the sincerity of his remorse, the emotional fracture still hidden in his posture. And for a brief, unexpected moment, she felt compassion not for the man he had been, but for the man he was struggling to become. That evening, as she returned to her penthouse, she found a small envelope waiting at her door. No name, no markings, just a handwritten note inside. It was from Jude. Amara, I came today not to disrupt your life, but to acknowledge the truth I spent years refusing to see. You are everything I pretended to be, principled, strong, and worthy of respect. Your speech showed me the leader you always were. Even when I tried to diminish you, I cannot undo the pain I caused you. I cannot return the years you lost. But I want you to know, I finally see you, clearly, deeply, truly. And I am sorry, not the kind of sorry offered to escape consequences, but the kind born from confronting the truth of myself. I will never again ask for your forgiveness. I do not deserve it. But I needed you to know that the man who hurt you no longer exists. You freed me from him by walking away. Jude. Amara read the letter twice, her chest tightening. There were no manipulations in the words, no pleas, no excuses, only honesty. Painful, raw honesty. She set the letter down gently. No tears fell, no old wounds reopened, no desire for reconciliation stirred. But she whispered into the quiet room, "Thank you, Jude. Not for the apology itself, but for closing the last remaining door of their past with dignity." The following week, Amara dove deeper into her community work, launching a new initiative focused on empowering women in the construction industry. She held workshops, mentorship sessions, and scholarship programs. She traveled to rural areas to meet with young women who dreamed of careers once dominated by men. Her life became a mosaic of purpose. Meanwhile, Jude began rebuilding himself slowly. He attended therapy sessions, worked part-time as a logistics assistant for a small construction supply store, and continued volunteering at the community center. The work was humble, but he embraced it. Every day, he tried to be a little better, not for praise, not for a grand comeback, but simply because it felt right. He lived quietly. He lived honestly. And every so often, he found himself thinking of Amara not with longing, but with gratitude. One evening, after volunteering, he walked along the waterfront again. The sky was painted in soft purples and orange streaks. He sat on the same bench where he once cried for everything he had lost. But this time, he didn't cry. He sat with his hands folded, breathing steadily, letting the breeze wrap around him like a small mercy. He whispered, "Thank you for letting me learn, even if the lesson cost everything." For the first time, he felt at peace with the consequences. He knew he would never regain his former life. He knew he would never get Amara back. He knew he would carry his mistakes forever, but he also knew something else. He was no longer the man who spat on his wife at a gala. He was no longer the man who believed he deserved the world. He was no longer the man blinded by ambition and ego. He was just Jude, and for now, that was enough. The standing ovation faded slowly as Amara stepped away from the podium, not because the applause died, but because the weight of the moment settled deeper into her spirit. The summit hall, filled with the brightest minds and most respected leaders in the region, felt almost sacred now, a place where she had finally spoken her truth without fear, without hesitation, without the shadow of her past dimming her voice. She returned to her seat, but the congratulations continued, handshakes, warm smiles, grateful nods. A young woman clasped Amara's hands and whispered, "You changed my life with those words." Another attendee said, "Your courage reminds us what leadership truly means." Amara accepted every gesture with grace, yet somewhere within her, a quiet awareness kept humming. She had seen Jude. She had felt the weight of his gaze. She knew he had come not to reclaim anything, but to face what he had broken. And strangely, she didn't feel anger, only closure. Hours later, after the summit concluded, Amara stepped out of the grand venue into the warm glow of evening. The sky glimmered in soft hues of amber, lavender, and faint gold like a world exhaling after a storm. Her assistant approached. "Ma'am, your car is ready." Amara nodded but did not move immediately. Instead, she glanced back toward the hall, toward the place where she had risen higher than she ever imagined she could. And then she walked toward the exit with the quiet confidence of a woman who knew her worth. Across the courtyard, Jude stood under the shade of a jacaranda tree. He didn't approach her. He didn't wave or call her name. He simply watched her with a peace he hadn't felt in years. When Amara reached the curb, their eyes met again, brief but meaningful. No bitterness, no longing, just acknowledgement. Amara smiled, softly, small, respectful, final. Jude lowered his gaze in gratitude. Then they turned in opposite directions, each walking toward a life they now fully claimed. Over the next months, Amara's initiatives transformed entire communities. Affordable housing projects broke ground. Safety regulations became stricter. Local women entered leadership roles previously closed to them. International organizations sought her guidance. Everywhere she went, people recognized her not as a woman who survived humiliation, but as a woman who turned pain into purpose. In private moments, she allowed herself to rest more. She planted flowers on her balcony. She hosted dinners with friends. She laughed freely again, without worrying if joy needed to be justified. And though she rarely thought of Jude, when she did, it was with compassion, not the naive compassion of a wife wishing to save someone, but the wise compassion of a woman who had saved herself. Meanwhile, Jude continued quietly rebuilding his life. He remained in his modest apartment, working part-time and volunteering often. People at the community center grew fond of him. Children laughed around him. Elderly volunteers offered advice. Slowly, he began discovering who he was when ego wasn't in the room. He didn't try to re-enter the corporate world. Not yet, maybe not ever. He focused on recovery, humility, and character, things he had neglected for far too long. One evening, while packing food parcels, A volunteer remarked, "You seem lighter nowadays." Jude smiled faintly. "I had to lose everything to realize what matters," and in that truth, he found a peace deeper than he had ever known. Back in her penthouse, Amara stood on her balcony at sunset, watching the city lights bloom across the skyline. Her heart felt steady now, free from the weight of old wounds. Full of the promise of what lay ahead, she touched the railing softly and whispered, "Thank you for the journey." Not to Jude, not to fate, but to herself. Because surviving had been the first step, speaking had been the second, becoming had been the rest. She closed her eyes as a warm breeze brushed her cheeks. A new chapter awaited, and this time it belonged entirely to her. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you reflect on your own strength, leave a comment below. What lesson did you take from Amara's journey? Your voice matters here. And if you love powerful African cinematic folktale dramas filled with emotion, betrayal, healing, and moral wisdom, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story that touches your heart. Thank you for watching. Stay strong, stay kind, stay true to yourself.